Old wounds are slow to heal. CalmWaters. Summary. Things were good now. Rain was happy, for the first time in a long time. So why did they still have days like this, where everything hurt? Why did the past still weigh so heavily on their shoulders? Or, a post-canon Rita FIC about trauma and stress. Because after everything Rain has been through, they're gonna have a bit of it. Notes. Work text. Rain pulled their hood up further over their head, holding a hand out in front of them. They pulled it away with a hiss as there was a brief burning sensation in their palm. It was still raining. Just a small sprinkle, but enough for a walk home to be excruciatingly painful at the moment. They took a deep breath, leaning back against the outside of the building they were standing under the overhang of. Today hadn't been a good day. Which was strange, because it had been a relatively good week so far. As slow as things were coming along in rebuilding the aisles, progress was still happening. And Rain was a big part of that progress. But today, Rain's body was so badly tensed that every movement was painful. It was their typical stress response. To freeze and reevaluate every decision of their life right down to their birth. But there hadn't been time for this response in years. They'd learned to soldier through the pain. The pain, in response, had seeped down to their bones and become a permanent part of them. The scars on their face ached at the most inconvenient times as well. They had already been aching when they had heard the topic of discussion that day, for the council working on the rebuilding process on the boiling aisles. With a hand pressed to their cheek, Rain's heart sank as they heard that sentence, the one they'd been dreading since the beginning. Today, we'll begin to discuss the restructuring of the criminal justice system. Rain had briefly closed their eyes at that, rubbing their hand over their cheek again and preparing themselves for the repeated topic of Ida, who inevitably came up many times, like they'd predicted. She was still somewhat of a criminal in the eyes of many. Now that they had finally gotten that out of the way, all they wanted to do was go home. To the owl house, where they'd been staying since Bellows had been defeated. They put their hand out again, Rain still stinging against their palm. Great. They were too tired to do magic. They'd just have to wait. Long day? Darius slipped into the space beside them, also very much looking like he wanted to go home. They stood beside each other in silence for a few minutes, Rain finally turning their head in his direction. How's Hunter? That seemed like a good conversational topic. Rain wasn't entirely sure what Darius's relation to Hunter was at the moment, but he had given the 16-year-old a place to stay, and seemed to be close to him. He's strange, Darius said. I already knew that, though. How are Luz and King? They're good. Luz has been giving me the strangest books from the human realm, lately. Darius raised an eyebrow. Anything that could apply to our situation? Hunter has told me about the human systems. In terms of government, he didn't seem terribly impressed. No, Rain leaned their head back against the wall, the rain beginning to abate. Most of them are about possums. The urban legend? Darius asked, the corner of his lips quirking upward. Rain shrugged in response. It was strange having these short talks with Darius. They'd been brought closer together by everything that had happened. Trauma had a way of doing that to people, Rain had found. They parted ways once the rain had cleared, and Rain cut through the market to attempt to get home faster. That was their second mistake of the day. Their first mistake was getting up in the first place, when they had woken up with pain in their scars and a heaviness on their back. Rain crossed their arms to their chest and hummed to themselves, occasionally moving out of the way of other witches. The pain in their muscles was only growing stronger. They stopped for a moment, taking in their surroundings. There were a lot of other witches and demons in the marketplace. They were all talking very loudly. Rain gritted their teeth and continued walking, having to move out of the way quite a bit now. Sound was an interesting thing. They loved music when it was played by themselves or their friends. Or, really, anyone who actually knew how to play an instrument. Chatter had no rhythm, though. No melody that Rain had memorized. And when there were this many voices at once, it was grating. They pushed through the crowd regardless, barely breathing until they were free of it, their skin crawling. They'd learned to push through these kind of things over the years, though. They'd had too. They relaxed slightly as they finally approached the owl house, King and Luz in the middle of doing something outside that involved a copious amount of stuffed animals. And a few kitchen knives, in King's case. Luz dropped a stuffed cat and ran over, nearly tripping over a stone before coming to a halt in front of them. "Hi, Rain. I didn't see you this morning at all. Ida told us your secrets at breakfast." She reached up and caught a stuffed animal that was thrown in her direction. She was staying solely with Ida for a week while her school was out, spending all weekends and some school nights with Ida outside of school breaks. It had been difficult for Rain's partner to get used to it. But for Luz's sake, they all had. "That's great," Rain gave her a smile and went inside the house. They'd come to genuinely care for Ida's children. Luz reminded them so much of Ida when she was younger. And she had her own unique traits too. Rain doubted most 15-year-olds were as friendly as she was. King was goofy and loved to snuggle, especially in the evenings. Things were good now. Rain was happy, for the first time in a long time. So why did they still have days like this, where everything hurt? Why did the past still weigh so heavily on their shoulders? "Hey, Rain," Ida walked over from whatever she had been doing in the kitchen. Likely using it for non-kitchen purposes. "Hello," Rain slowly put away their things, leaning against the wall. Ida walked over and kissed their cheek with a smirk, looked back over to the stove. There was red steam rising from the cauldron over it. "Lily told me to ask you about something related to an exhibit at the museum? Or preserving the history we lived or something, I dunno." "I'll talk to Lilith about it tomorrow." Rain leaned their head back and closed their eyes for a moment, taking in the quietness of the kitchen. Other than the occasional popping noise from Ida's cauldron. They turned their head in that direction. "Do I even want to know?" "Probably not," councilperson Ida snorted, lightly poking their side. They let out a small laugh, looking through the window. Luz and King were shifting the stuffed animals into bow formation. Ida followed their gaze. Originally, I think they had set up a banquet. Clearly something went wrong with the negotiations between groups, and now there's a war brewing. King's doing." Rain did their best not to flinch as Ida's hand came up to rest against their aching cheek. "Of course. Luz couldn't start a war. She sure can finish one though." Ida said it in jest, but Rain couldn't help the images that flashed through their mind at the idea of the end of a war. Or a battle. They retreated to their and Ida's room for the rest of the evening, practicing the various instruments they owned. Rain was already curled up on the edge of the nest when Ida came up to sleep, once the kids were already at least in their rooms for the night. King usually went to sleep very quickly, but Luz liked to draw or read for an hour or so before settling down herself. Sometimes, she'd go down the stairs if Ida was already asleep and sit with Rain until they went up as well. "You're not doing anything illegal at the moment, are you?" Rain asked. "What kind of question is that, Rainstorm?" Ida sounded more amused than anything as she flopped down beside them, crossing her arm behind her head. That content smile, that Rain had grown to love, was on her face. Everyone's starting to discuss how criminals are going to be dealt with again. I just want to make sure. Even if I am, they won't catch me. She uncrossed her arm and brushed her hair away from her face. Good, Rain moved closer to her, until their head was resting against her chest, and her hand was clutched in between theirs. Slowly, their eyes closed. You could dream without images, Rain had found. Sometimes, a dream could just be feelings and sensations. Their dream that night consisted mostly of fear in all of its different types. There was that stab to their heart that had happened whenever Ida had been put in danger. Something that had happened far too many times. There was also the heaviness of fear to their shoulders when they realized that processing it would put themselves and others in jeopardy. Then that slimy, repulsive state from when Bellows had invaded their body. And, of course, that ache in their muscles when they refused to process not only their fear, but all of their feelings. The ache grew more and more intense until finally, their eyes shot open. They took a deep breath, rubbing at their arms and suppressing a shiver. Ida was snoring beside them, laying flat on her back. They stood up, brushing off the leaves and twigs that always got stuck in their hair and clothing. Their throat was dry. They needed something to drink. They were careful as they walked downstairs, casting a quick muffling spell to hide the sound of their footsteps against the creaking stairs and floorboards. It was quite late, and Ida and the kids didn't need to be woken up for this. They got water once they were in the kitchen, in one of those weird multicolored plastic cups Luz had brought one day that King liked so much. All of the other cups were dirty, because nobody had bothered to clean them that day. They set the cup down at the table and laid their head against said table, trying to even out their breathing. Turns out, they were really bad at processing stressful events even when they tried. They bit back a groan, then a shriek, as there was a way too cheerful. "Hey Rain," from underneath the table. Rain had just enough self-control to keep themselves from jumping up, instead giving themselves enough time for their sleepy brain to properly register the voice. "Luz," they said, slowly, "why are you under the table?" "There was a bug in my room." Luz poked her head out and pushed herself up to sit beside Rain, looking around. "No, it got away. I was trying to take it outside. When King finds it tomorrow, he's going to eat it. Or Hoodie'll eat it. Or Ida will eat it. If the bug doesn't possess the necessary evasive functioning it needs to survive, then perhaps it should be eaten by your brother." "Whoa. That's dark." Luz gave them a grin, then frowned. "Are you okay? Why are you awake?" "I am fine. Why are you awake?" "Couldn't sleep." Luz yawned. "I think I can now, though. Good night." She ran off before Rain could say anything else. "Okay then." They laid their head back against the table, keeping it there until there was a cold hand on the side of their neck. Ida's. They turned around. "Why is everyone awake right now?" "Technically I wasn't until Luz woke me up. Said you looked like you needed someone or something." Her hand moved to their shoulder. They stood up, walking back in the direction of their room. Ida followed closely. She settled back down beside them in the nest. And then, she waited. Something she had gotten much better at over the years. "I just want it to go away," Rain finally said, rubbing a hand over their face. "I thought it would all go away. The stress and the pain, and the constant anticipation of something bad happening. But it hasn't. It sucks like that." Ida draped her arm over them, their heads pressed together. Rain's breathing evened out. Giving this a try again had been one of the best decisions of their life so far. I just want it to go away, they repeated, their voice barely more than a whisper. Their eyelids were drooping. I know, Ida said, a soft smile on her face. I get it. The kids get it. It's not something that goes away overnight. Or even after months. You have to fight it one day at a time until you're finally ready to give it the last whack and slam it out of your life. Or maybe you'll never get to that point. But it'll get better. Trust me. Why do all of your metaphors involve hitting something? Rain murmured, a smile on their face now. I'm just cool like that, Ida decided, without a moment of thought. Luz thinks I'm cool. Luz is 15, Rain laid their head against Ida's chest for the second time that night. The gentle and steady pattern of her breathing calmed them, the ache in their muscles subsiding enough for them to close their eyes. They were already half asleep when Ida kissed their forehead. She knew they couldn't hear her when she whispered, "Good night, Rain. It will get better with time. I promise."